what we'll do is we will explore the working of this particular syntax. These are your famous array methods: for each, find, filter, map, every, sum, reduce, all of that. Somshikhar,
Yes, sir.
give me an array of players' names. Your
MS
favorite
Dhoni,
player names.
MS Dhoni,
Dhoni.
Kohli, Sachin,
Okay. Virat.
Sachin.
Sachin. Okay. I think let's work with these three values.
Okay.
So what have we learned about arrays? We learned that arrays are used for storing collection of values. One of the most common operations on an array is iterating over an
Iteration.
array, accessing every single element within an array. Traditionally, we can do it with a for loop, but JavaScript also provides us with few array methods that will help us iterate over that particular array. One of the most common one happens to be the for each method, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So I'll say players.forEach. What do we pass as an argument to the for each method?
Callback function.
We'll pass a callback function. Now this callback function will be provided with one value or multiple values. What is the first parameter for the callback function?
Uh, for each element of the array.
It is the element within the array. And then we can say console.log ele, save the file. Let's run this particular file and say node dct for each.js. And it's quite obvious that we get access to Dhoni, Virat, and Sachin. We are able to access every single element within the array. This callback function can also have access to a couple of other parameters. What are they?
Index and array itself.
Right. So we can either get access to the index. We could also get access to the array that we are iterating over. So I could say something like ele, I, and array. So you can see Dhoni is found at the 0th index of that array. Virat is found at the first index of the array. Sachin is found at the second index of the array. Now the question that you guys have to ask is, yes, I know that this is a callback function. How is that JavaScript is able to provide each element within that particular array as an argument to this callback function? And at what point of time are these functions being executed, and how is the value being passed? Because at this point of time, we are clueless as to how element is available, isn't it? Do we know how element is appearing inside our function?
No, sir.
We do not. Do we have any idea how index is being available to us within the function? No.
No, sir.
So what we'll do now is to understand the inner working of this callback functions and its behavior. We will go on to implement our own array method. Okay. I'm going to call this as players.dct for each. Is there a JavaScript function called as dct for each?
No, sir.
Will this work?
Yeah.
Hey, how will it work, man, if the method is not there?
No, like if we write something
If we write some
to
logic,
display something.
if we write some logic, we will be able to access it, right? So this also demonstrates a couple of really cool features that you can extend. Now keep in mind, the language is providing you with a certain set of methods. If you're working with an array, there are certain set of array methods, but the language also provides you a provision where you can declare your own methods. Okay, I'm going to show you how that is done. So what I'll do is I will now say array. So array, this is our constructor function. Now, if we want to attach or add any new method, so first and foremost, there is no DCT for each in JavaScript. Okay, but what we will do is we will introduce this particular method in our program. So if you want to introduce your own methods in the language, you can now access something called as the prototype property. And on prototype, we can now specify the method called as DCT for each. Now, when for a property, when you assign a function as its value, what does it become? For a property, when you assign a function as its value, what does it become? What is it called as?
Method.
Absolutely, it's called as a method. That's the reason I'm saying DCT for each is now a array method that we have introduced.
Right.
Okay, so let us kind of go one step behind. Okay, so DCT for each, if I don't do this, if I run the code, what will happen? It will first throw me an error. It says players.dct for each is not a function because JavaScript does not have a DCT for each method. But the moment I introduce on my array a DCT for each, now what happens? Good, it does not throw me an error. It's a very clear indication that this particular method is now made available inside JavaScript. Now, whereas these three values coming, these three are coming to you from this earlier piece of code. Let me just comment it out. Okay, so let us kind of do a reverse engineering to understand how this works. So for the DCT for each, what do we want to pass as an argument to this function? We want to pass a function as an argument. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
So let me ask you this question. When you pass a function as an argument to another method, what is this method called as, or what is this function called as?
Higher order function.
Very good. It's called as a higher order function. So the function which is being passed to the function, what is it called as?
Callback function.
Very good. This is basically the callback function. This happens to be your higher order function. So what I'll do is, because for this particular method, I am passing a function as an argument. If I'm passing a function as an argument, or if I'm passing an argument, I should capture it as a parameter.
Yes, sir.
Yes or no?
Yes,
So
sir.
I will specify the parameter called as callback. Right, that's the name that I choose. Callback or callback function. I can actually make it like very elaborate. It's a callback function. That's the parameter. What do I know? If I now do console.log of callback function, if I do a console.log of callback function, what will happen? This particular function is going to get executed. Let us say that I'll do console.log hi there. So when I run this piece of code, you can see that callback function is basically this function.
Function.
If I execute this function, what will happen? It will print hi there, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So this function, I have passed it as an argument to my method. So I'm capturing it as a parameter called as callback function. And then inside this, I'm invoking that particular function. Now watch this. If I specify something like a message and I have access to that particular variable called as a message. So because I'm invoking this function from here, I can now specify hello there. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Right. Now I don't want to console log this here, but I just want to invoke that particular function. Now watch the magic happen. So when I do this, the function was declared here. We passed this as an argument. Remember what we always say. We say that this callback function has been provided the value. Where is the value being provided? It has been provided from inside this particular function. Now observe this very, very carefully. Let's go back to our syntax of how the for each works, right? We say element. Yeah, and we do console.log of element. Now DCT for each is a method on a variable called as players. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Now, if I want to get access to this players variable inside this method, how do I get access to it?
This keyword.
Very good. So I could use this keyword, isn't it?
This keyword.
So what I'll do is I will fall back on using our traditional for loop. I'll say for let I is equal to 0, I less than this dot length. Of course, I could also do players dot length. But we learned that using the variable name is not a good idea. It's not a good practice, because what if the variable changed to fruits? This
Yeah.
code breaks. We don't want that, right? What happens in JavaScript? Irrespective of whatever your variable name is of an array, you can still call the forEach method on it. Why? Because inside the method, they're not referring it to by the variable name, but they're referring it via the this
This
piece,
keyword.
this dot length, and then you have I plus plus. So at this point of time, what can I do? I now have, I am in a position of accessing every single element which is there within our array, isn't it? Now, can I invoke this function, Somshekhar?
Yes, sir.
How?
Uh,
This function, how can I invoke it here?
a callback function.
Absolutely. That is this parameter, right?
Yeah, callback function of.
Very good. So I can now say callback function of, so that means to say this function is now getting executed. What is the first parameter for my callback function?
Element.
So how can I get access to the element? I can now say this of I.
This of I, yes.
Okay. Now I want you guys to see the magic happening. So when I now run this file and say node dct forEach.js, we are now able to perform the same behavior that a traditional forEach method is capable of doing. And every time I say that for this callback function, they are passing each element within the array. Or when you're doing with React, for this callback function, they're providing the state value. How is it happening? Because whatever you specify, when they are invoking that particular callback function, they are passing the value as an argument. Whatever is here, when they're invoking that callback function, whatever values they're passing as an argument, only those are the values I can now accept it here. Okay. Let us say I also want access to the index. Will it work now?
No, sir.
No. Why? Because when we're calling that function, we're only passing one argument to it, right? But this has two parameters. If I do it right now, it's going to be undefined. What can I do? When I'm invoking that particular function, I can now specify the index. Can I now have access to an array?
Yes, sir.
So what should I do? I have to,
Pass this value.
very good. I have to pass this value. Now what's going to happen? When I run, I have access to all of these things. Now keep in mind, they are passing those arguments. Remember what we always said. We said the first parameter is necessary because it's mandatory. We want to use that particular value. And we always said that index and the first, second, third, the third argument, which is your array, is basically optional.
Optional.
That's what we always say, right? Why do we say that? Because at the end of the day, they are, any which case, they are passing those three values. They are, any which case, passing those values. It's only up to you if you want to use them.
Yes, sir.
So right now, if you don't want it, no problem. For some reason, if you want it, no problem. Does this make sense?
Yes, sir.
So whenever we talk about callback functions, this is what is happening. You're passing the function as an argument to another higher order function. Inside that function, when they execute this callback function, they are passing the necessary arguments to it so that you can access it outside. Does it make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very nice.